Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Best Practices for Fusion 360, brought to you by NexGenCAM. My name is Amer. In today's episode, we're going to take a look at some of the biggest mistakes a lot of new Fusion 360 users get tied up in. So I just made a quick little list, just by my interactions with a lot of new users. So here's my list of top 10 mistakes to avoid when getting started with Fusion 360. So let's go take a look. So this is just a quick list that I've laid out here. As you can see, we're going to touch on a lot of different things from all sorts of different spaces inside of Fusion 360. We got some in manufacturing, we got some in design, and then we also got a little bit from what I think would be the best case learning practices. So we're going to start off with a little bit of team and data management, customizing your Fusion 360 experience. What are some of the best practices for sketching, things to avoid there, adaptability, how do we do proper CAM setups? How do we reduce the amount of overconstraining for our toolpaths? And which toolpath is the best one to use at certain instances, right? Then we're going to take a little bit of a look at 2D versus 3D. How do we decide which one? And then the next two that I have here are just mostly kind of concerning how people really want to get rolling with Fusion, meaning how do they want to set up their training, how do they want to get used to Fusion 360's features and functions. So with that said, let's go ahead and get started with our first one. All right, team and data management. So what I really like about team and data management side of Fusion 360 is the fact that your data is actually saved in the cloud because you use the cloud service. But what most people kind of forget about or don't actually take the time to create when they start Fusion 360 is their teams, right? So like Fusion 360, you can go ahead and create teams for multiple people inside of your organization, or even if it's just you and a couple of colleagues. This will help you share your files easier with them, collaborate easier with them, communicate with them. And all of this can be done inside of Fusion's data panel. That's one way to do it. You can just use the People tab and share your project with them from that level. Or what I kind of like to do is actually access the web-based team management UI, again, which is doable through the data panel. This gives you a lot more options, and as an admin or maybe even as just a project creator, you have the ability to go ahead and edit permissions for people who actually view your project or create projects. You can remove them, add new people. You can change how they actually contribute to the team. So there's a lot of helpful settings in there that you can go ahead and change inside of the web-based UI. The other big thing about creating teams that I think kind of most people kind of brush over is the fact that you can share your common assets across the team, right? So for example, let's just say that you wanted to kind of standardize your tool libraries across your shop floor and give one person or not one or many people the ability to create those tool libraries for their individual machines or however you really want to set that up. So that way, if person A actually creates a tool library, then person B can share and view that tool library as well. So that kind of helps standardize things across the shop floor. And it's just not tool libraries. You can also make sure that you're standardizing your post libraries, your templates, and all sorts of other common assets. So pretty much all of that can be achievable through the team and data management side of Fusion 360. So I would definitely take some time to see how that works and how you can get that set up. All right, number 2 on my list is customizing your Fusion 360 experience, right? So this is the ability where you can go ahead and create this environment for yourself that you can see things that are most important to you, or even hide the things that are really not that important to you to view. So for example, if you were to specifically go into the preferences menu, inside of the preferences menu, you're going to see a lot of different opportunities that you can change there. For example, you can even select your own mouse control profile. Fusion 360 gives you the ability to pick from some different templates. So even if you're coming from a different software, then you can kind of it'd be easier for you to get used to the controls on it. You can also, for example, if you go to the manufacturing side of things, you can turn off or turn on things you would like to view. My favorite one is the machining time for each process, right? So you can get an idea of how long it takes for a single toolpath. You can also go ahead and make sure you permanently change your default units. That way, when every time you create a new document, you're not on the wrong default unit. So have all that set up inside of the preferences menu. And also finally, what I kind of like is if you look right at the bottom there, there's a category called preview features. This is really cool place that you can kind of explore what are some of the new features that are coming to Fusion 360. It gives you the ability to kind of test it, see if it works really well. And you can also have, for example, if you have the machining extension applied to your account, then you can also go ahead and see a lot of those features or some of the new features that are rolling out to that particular package as well. So definitely take the time to go ahead and spend some time inside of the preferences menu, see what settings you want to turn on or things that you want to hide. Really elevates your experience out of Fusion 360. All right, tip number 3. So what are some sketching best practices, right? Typically when people start sketching on Fusion or trying to explore that realm inside of Fusion, I've noticed that sometimes we often grab a sketching tool and then drop the point kind of random in space. I always like to tell people try to avoid this and use the origin point that you kind of see here on the graphic. That way you can constrain your part a little bit better, fix it in space. That way when you dimension it or change it afterwards, you have a point that you can reference. And it's always easier to make the changes without having everything else move around if you actually draw and constrain it to your origin point, okay? Something else that I also kind of see a lot that doesn't get much use out of is the constraints menu. So the constraints are really helpful on Fusion 360 because it helps you build relationships between, two different sketch entities. For example, if you want to create a line always tangent to a circle, this is one of the constraints that you would use for it. You would use a tangent constraint. But it's also not just for the ability to create constraints. It can also simplify your screen a little bit. Instead of having multiple different dimensions to kind of do the same thing constraints would do, I would always typically go ahead and use a constraint. So make sure you kind of check out some of the constraint options there on that constraint panel. And then finally, I would like to talk a little bit about the design history. So Fusion 360 has the ability to go ahead and capture your design history, meaning capture every step of your design process. So typically, when you open up a file that's not drawn in Fusion 360, and if you upload that and open it in Fusion 360, you might notice it doesn't actually show you, and if you were to make changes to that file, you might notice it doesn't actually show you the design history. So you might need to turn that on, and having to turn that on is a pretty simple step. All you would really need to do is right-click here on the top level name, or the file name of your part, and then if you scroll down right to the end, you'll notice here that it says there's something called Capture Design History. Go ahead and click on that. Now after you click on that, it will go ahead and capture all of the different steps and all of the design steps that you're taking or making changes to your initial part. It's particularly handy to have your design history because now you have the ability to go ahead and re-edit those sketches that you already created earlier. This will eliminate the need to go ahead and create new sketches on top of an already existing sketch, right? So if you want to simplify your design history, try to eliminate the amount of sketches you're always creating, then you can simply go ahead and re-edit your sketches, and this is probably best practice. Next is adaptability, so direct 3D model editing. I kind of like this aspect of Fusion, how it makes it very easy to make quick changes to your model. So typically what I tell people is try to take a couple of seconds or minutes to visualize what your part looks like before you actually start creating it. This will kind of help you organize your thoughts and organize your process of design. And designing with intent will help you make sure that you are creating your product in a way that you can make changes to it much easier down the road if you are anticipating changes to be made, right? So one way to do this is you can opt to keep your sketches simple and skip the process of actually sketching out your chamfers, your fillets, and things like that, easier features of your part, because all of that can be actually directly edited using the direct model editing features on Fusion 360, and all of those can be done on your solid body. Now, you can also go ahead and create your designs using parametric modeling on Fusion 360, which is kind of nice because now in case you knew that you had changes to be made to your part, or your part had multiple or different variations, then simply using the parametric features, you can quickly change dimensions or values of those specific features of your part. You can now just bring up a whole table, and inside of that table you can go ahead and change the values much faster and make those edits much faster to your part. So definitely take a look at the parametric modeling side of things on Fusion. I think you would really appreciate the advantage it gives you. All right, tip number 5, incorrect cam setups. Now, I don't see this happen often because Fusion is really good at making sure it picks the right model for all of your machining operations inside of the setup. This kind of happens most often when you have multiple bodies in your file, and Fusion doesn't really look for a default file in that case. So what I've done here is I've actually gone ahead and selected my 2 soft jaws here. That is not part of my current operation. So in order to fix that, I needed to make sure that I go back into my cam setup, cross out of the old bodies, select my actual body that I want to be machining. And this will help me go ahead and use my 3D operations on this particular part, because I can recognize the surfaces out of that body. And also, for example, let's say you're trying to use the select same size diameter feature inside the hole or drilling operation. I have now the ability to do that as well, because Fusion can recognize all of the other hole surfaces in that part. All right, tip number 6, over-constraining toolpaths. Now, I see this most often with kind of new users to Fusion. I feel like if you're experienced with Fusion now, you might already kind of know this because you learned the hard way. But now I do appreciate that there's so many options inside of these operations that are kind of, nice and mind-blowing at some point. But try not to get overly confused with what some of these options do. It's often very easy to just kind of pick a tool, give it some geometry, and I personally go ahead and hit OK, because I would like to see what that toolpath ends up looking like. Now, it might not be perfect at the get-go, which is fine, because now I can always go back in there and re-edit the toolpath, and I can do what I want it to do. If you kind of go ahead and turn on a lot of these different operations, they're kind of unnecessary. So you don't really need a lot of these turned on anyway. So kind of keep the toolpath simple. Oftentimes just using picking the right tool, giving it some geometry, maybe adjusting a couple of things in the height tab, really can get you almost 99% there. If there's any need to go ahead and change a few things, now you can re-edit that operation and then fine-tune it. So I like to think of it as a way of, it's easier to kind of fine-tune the toolpath than creating an overly complex toolpath, getting multiple errors, getting errors like unable to calculate toolpath and things like that, and having to re-simplify everything, right? So go ahead and keep the toolpath really simple when you're setting it up, and then afterwards you can always go back, re-edit it, and then fine-tune it to make sure it looks like exactly what you want it to look like. Number 7, inappropriate toolpath selection. Now, there's a lot of different toolpaths on Fusion 360, especially in the 3D toolpaths, and some of them are perfect for certain applications, and some of them can actually produce results that are not very favorable. So all I'm saying is make sure that you kind of test out a couple of different operations for that particular surface and see if one gives you better result than the other. So as an example, you can see here, I just had this kind of curved surface that goes from some shallow areas to a steep area, and I've used the scallop operation here on the left hand side. I'm not a particular fan of kind of having that crosswork or like the box effect on there. So I switched over to a parallel operation and gave me a much better surface finish. So make sure you take the time to go ahead and test out a couple of different strategies before you kind of stick with the first one, because certain tool paths will work better for different geometry. Number 8, 2D versus 3D. Which one? So again, there's a few ways to work, and this is all depending on the workflow that you're looking to get or looking to kind of nail down. As for example, this part is, as you can see, it's a 2D part, right? But it's also got some areas where a 3D operation can be a lot more beneficial. On the left, I have 2D milling. Now, 2D milling, if I was to kind of break down this part into different operations, I will have to have multiple different operations. For example, maybe a couple of contours, a couple of pocket operations, and things of that nature, right? So let's just say that I wanted to kind of rough all of this out in just one single step, one operation. That's kind of where we start to think of this mentality where maybe I can use some 3D operations even on a 2D part, right? Because as you can see here on the right, I just used a simple adaptive clearing operation to kind of rough out a lot of that stock from there. Gives me the ability to make it much faster, a lot less operations. So you kind of get into that mindset where you can only do 2D operations on a 2D part. I would suggest maybe kind of explore some of the different options in there, because you can definitely leverage some of these 3D operations even on a 2D part. All right, number 9. This one is about how to best shorten up that learning curve. I have two graphs here. Now keep in mind this is purely for visual purposes. On the left, we have a curve depicting the learning progression of a single user. And on the right, we have a curve depicting multiple users working together to learn Fusion 360. Notice the growth rate is faster on the right. Now Fusion is a great software to learn on. Its simplicity and user-friendliness is what attracts a lot of new customers. However, like every new thing you learn, there's a learning curve to it. I often find myself training a lot of new Fusion customers, and as much as they tell me they love the software, they find themselves lost when trying to find the best way to learn individually. In my opinion, group learning can really help you accelerate your learning progress. If you are a new customer wondering if you should just buy the one seat of Fusion first for a member of your team before you purchase the other seats you require, I would recommend you do so. Now, I understand that this is not always possible for certain organizational constraints. However, if you do have the ability to do so, go ahead and do it. If your whole team can learn Fusion 360 as a group, you can now share ideas or discuss how you went about a certain process, keep that discussion in-house, foster that environment, have the resources to continue to learn and grow exponentially rather than having a single seater kind of struggling to figure out it, themselves. It's like building anything, in my opinion. The more hands and minds you have, the faster you can get to the stage where you are all operating in unison. Now this last one isn't just a tip, it's an invitation. If you're interested in exploring Fusion 360 or if you're new to the product, talk to us. We specialize in training, helping you expand your knowledge of Fusion to go from a newbie to a power user. We can also help you improve and streamline your workflows, and we do it through conversation. No lengthy automated hold times, no multiple day responses. We're here to help. When you purchase Fusion 360 through your friendly neighborhood Autodesk partner, who also happens to be a recipient of the Top Service Delivery Partner Award for this year, you can rest assured you will be taken care of well. As part of our efforts to improve our services to you, we built our own app that gives you the ability to look for direct support right inside of Fusion 360. Submit tickets, check out our training schedules, resources, and much more. This little graphic is just a preview of what it can offer. More information on that can be found in the link below. It's free, it's fast, and it's convenient. With that, thanks for watching this episode of Best Practices on Fusion 360. If you have more tips and tricks, put them in the comment below. Follow, give us a thumbs up, and we hope to see you on the next one.